Steven Seagal leaned into the microphone, lips curling in that half-smile he wore whenever he wanted to remind the world of his own importance. "Chuck Norris," he said, letting the words hang in the air, stretching the pause until cameras were ready, microphones fully pointed. "He can't drop me. Not in a million years." The room froze. It wasn't the kind of silence that follows a polite joke, it was a crack in the air, a moment when people weren't sure if they were supposed to laugh, or if something had just gone too far. Then it came, scattered laughter, applause from the back rows, a few whistles. The tension cracked, but unevenly. Some laughed nervously, while others exchanged uneasy glances. The setting was a press conference in the early 90s, a downtown Los Angeles hotel ballroom dressed up for spectacle. Chandeliers buzzed with heat, white tablecloths reflected the glare of television lights, and the air smelled of overworked cables and stale coffee. Rows of journalists clutched notepads and chunky tape recorders, their pens hovering for the quote they had just been handed. It was bait, and they knew it. Seagal sat straight-backed, sunglasses still on though the room was windowless, his black suit tailored to exaggerate his size. He looked satisfied, head tilted just enough to catch the cameras at his best angle. He wasn't just answering a question, he was performing. Across the table, Chuck Norris sat with his arms folded loosely in front of him, plain blue shirt instead of tailored flash. His face was calm, almost expressionless, as if the insult had passed through him without catching. He didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't even shift in his chair. The stillness was disarming. Journalists leaned forward. The silence begged for a reply. Seagal's smirk widened, feeding on the attention. "Old style," he added, voice louder now, making sure no one could miss it. "That's what he is. Old karate movies, old ways. Times have changed. Real fighters, they're here now." He jabbed a thumb toward his own chest. "That era is gone." Cameras clicked furiously. Reporters whispered to each other, this was the headline they had come for. The contrast was too sharp to ignore. Seagal, the swaggering star who carried himself like he'd invented toughness; Norris, the quiet veteran, presence measured, gaze steady. A young journalist in the front row muttered, "This is gold," as his tape whirred. Another, older, just shook his head, eyes on Norris as though waiting for a storm. Finally, Norris moved. Just a tilt of his head, a small breath, the kind of pause that turns silence into weight. He leaned a fraction closer to the microphone, his voice low, almost conversational, but cutting through the ballroom with clarity. "Words are light," he said. "Let's see if you can stand when the lights are heavy." It wasn't loud, wasn't shouted, but it struck. The rhythm of the words was strange, simple, but heavier than Seagal's practiced bravado. For a beat, no one reacted. Then the split came again. Some laughed, thinking it was clever wordplay. Others didn't laugh at all. They felt the difference. Seagal's jab had been for effect, Norris's response for substance. The air shifted. Seagal's smirk faltered, just a second, before he covered it with a chuckle and leaned back, stretching his arms wide like a man bored by an opponent. But the cameras had caught the flicker, the split second when his mask cracked. Outside the ballroom, the story spread within hours. Evening talk shows replayed the line. Sports anchors debated it like analysts breaking down a fight they hadn't yet seen. Early online forums lit up, "Seagal owned him," some wrote. Others countered, "Norris doesn't waste words. He just promised to end him." By the next morning, papers carried side-by-side photos, Seagal grinning, Norris calm as stone. The captions leaned into the contrast, ego versus composure, noise versus silence. It wasn't just a quote anymore. It was the setup to something people suddenly wanted to see. Inside the hotel, as the press conference wrapped, Norris stood without hurry. He didn't glance toward Seagal. Didn't speak again. Just gave a short nod to the cameras and walked out, boots muffled against the thick carpet. The simplicity of it was unsettling. Seagal stayed seated, soaking up the last of the flashes, but for the first time, he didn't look entirely in control. The crowd in that ballroom had sensed it, even if they couldn't yet name it. The showboating star had picked a fight, but the quiet man had turned the room with a single sentence. And as the journalists packed their bags, still buzzing, a single question hovered above the clatter of typewriters and the ring of payphones. What happens when the lights really do get heavy? Just wondering, where are you watching from? Write it down below. The arena that night felt like it had been built for judgment. Outside, Los Angeles carried the lazy warmth of a Friday evening, streetlights buzzing, car horns drifting, but inside the dome the air was tense, brittle, almost metallic. Spotlights laced across the rafters, hunting for faces in the crowd. The sound system spat bass notes that rattled through plastic cups, and thousands of people pressed forward in their seats, caught somewhere between sport and theater. Banners and posters littered the place. One half shouted Team Seagal in neon letters, the other half, hastily printed, read Chuck's Army in simple ink. They weren't just props, they were declarations, battle lines in paper and fabric. Fathers balanced sons on their shoulders, couples argued about who would win, and vendors hawked sodas in voices that couldn't compete with the roar. At the commentator's desk, two men leaned toward microphones, faces glowing blue from monitors. "This isn't just nostalgia," the lead murmured, eyes flicking from notes to the tunnel. "It's philosophy against philosophy." His partner, older, nodded. "Noise versus proof," he said quietly. The bass dropped heavier. Fog bled into the tunnel mouth. Seagal appeared like an actor walking into his own myth, black coat brushing his boots, sunglasses still perched despite the absence of sun. The crowd fractured, boos rising against cheers until they fused into a single, vibrating sound. He moved deliberately, each step measured as though even the pace of his stride was scripted. At ringside he bowed with a half-smile, then burst into shadowboxing, wide cuts of his arms, heavy stomps, the crowd snapping photos. He fed off the attention, drawing it tighter around himself with every motion. "Look at that composure," one commentator said. His partner didn't look up. "Composure and stillness aren't the same," he answered, and the mic caught it. The music died abruptly. The arena lights cut to cold white. Silence rippled for half a second before a deeper roar swelled. Norris had stepped into view. No fog, no anthem, just the sound of his boots on concrete and the echo of the crowd recognizing him. No entourage surrounded him, only one coach and a cutman trailing loosely behind. And the reaction, louder than anyone expected. People stood without meaning to, children waved hand-painted signs, and strangers slapped each other's shoulders. His entrance wasn't designed for theater, yet it carried the weight of authenticity that showmanship couldn't fake. He lifted a hand once, small, unpracticed, and that alone sent sections of the crowd into chants. Inside the ring, the contrast became sharp as glass. Seagal shimmered with polish, his body broad, movements large, chin up like a monarch in armor. Norris seemed smaller, almost plain, loose shoulders, steady gaze, his calm creating a pressure that no spotlight could soften. The referee called them forward. Close up, the details sharpened, the creak of ropes, the sting of chalk dust, the faint smell of canvas soaked with decades of sweat. The ref's words tumbled in ritual cadence, a speech delivered 1,000 times but now weighted differently. Seagal stared straight through the official, eyes locked on Norris, smile thin. Norris didn't return the smile, didn't flinch. He gave nothing, no weakness, no performance. The crowd leaned as one organism. Some booed, others tried to start chants, others simply held breath. The arena itself became the third combatant, hungry, judging, longing for a moment that would survive beyond tonight. When gloves touched, Seagal's hand struck too hard, making a thud that echoed. Norris let his glove meet with no more force than needed, and the contrast cut deeper than words. The announcer stretched their names into the rafters. Seagal raised his arms to answer the sound. Norris lowered his chin and breathed out softly, as though measuring the floor beneath him. One man fought for cameras, the other seemed to fight gravity itself. The lights dimmed another shade. Dust hung like smoke, turning every beam into a visible line. Phones rose across the stands, red dots recording. Children stood on chairs, eyes wide. The commentators whispered, unwilling to break the fragile geometry of tension. Then, the bell. Seagal lunged first, all angles and spectacle, body written in capital letters for the crowd. Norris didn't counter, didn't mirror. He shifted half a step, letting aggression rush past him into empty space. The audience roared, then hushed. The rhythm of the fight had started, but not in the way anyone had expected. And in that sudden quiet, one realization spread seat to seat like a draft through an old house: this wasn't going to be a performance. This was going to be a lesson. The bell had barely stopped ringing when Seagal surged forward, body heavy and deliberate, as though he wanted the canvas itself to register his presence. His arms carved the air in wide arcs, palms slicing, knuckles flashing. The noise from the stands followed him like a wave, cheers from one side, jeers from the other, all boiling into a single, unstable roar. He wanted spectacle, and for the first 30 seconds he gave them exactly that. Norris didn't meet him halfway. He shifted only slightly, a step that was less a retreat than a redirection. His eyes didn't flinch from Seagal's chest, the calm gaze of a man counting not movements but mistakes. The first strike, a looping hand meant to intimidate, found only space. The glove brushed the edge of Norris's shirt, not his body. Gasps rose from the lower rows, quickly drowned by chants of Seagal's name. Seagal, unfazed on the surface, exaggerated his reset, clapping his fists together as though to punctuate his control. He feinted high, dropped low, then launched a driving strike up the middle. The kind of attack meant to shake confidence. Norris shifted again, almost imperceptibly, hips angling so that the strike slid past his ribs. His answer wasn't a counter but a brush of contact, knuckles tapping against Seagal's forearm, a whisper of ownership. Enough to remind the crowd that distance was being dictated by one man only. The commentators caught it. "He's not playing the same game," one said, voice low, almost reverent. Seagal's writing headlines, Norris is writing geometry. Frustration began to color Seagal's movements. His shoulders lifted higher, his steps grew sharper. He swung harder, faster, yet each attempt collided with nothing but the ghost of Norris's position. When he tried to clinch, Norris's arms guided his away with the ease of someone redirecting traffic. A small turn, a press at the wrist, and the hold dissolved into air. The crowd roared at the exchange, unsure whether they had just witnessed defense or magic. Then came the first touch that mattered. Seagal committed, dropping his weight into a heavy strike aimed for the head. The glove swept through space, empty again, and in that heartbeat Norris planted his feet, twisted just enough, and pressed a short, precise blow into the body. Not a knockout shot, not even a strike designed to bend a man in half, but a reminder to the lungs. Seagal staggered half a step back, eyes flickering wide. The audience exploded. Some shouted as if blood had been spilled, others froze, replaying the motion in their minds. Phones shook in unsteady hands, red dots flashing. A boy near the apron jumped on his chair, waving a sign with Norris's name. Seagal forced a grin, masking the stumble with bravado, beckoning Norris forward with a curled finger. The crowd responded in kind, half booing, half screaming for more. Norris stood still, unmoved, his silence louder than any invitation. When Seagal lunged again, he came narrow this time, cutting the flourish from his attack. A direct shot, nothing wasted. Norris shifted once more, an economy of motion, and Seagal's fist cut through air. The miss was worse than the first, it carried intent, not theater, and failing made the silence between cheers almost deafening. The older commentator exhaled into his microphone. "Listen to it. The room's not laughing anymore. It's waiting." And then, the moment no one expected so soon. Seagal, perhaps desperate to reassert dominance, unleashed a booming right, the kind meant for replay reels. It thundered past Norris's cheek by the width of a finger. In its wake came the counter, a tight pivot, a short strike to the chest, followed by a palm guiding Seagal's balance into emptiness. The younger man's heel scraped against canvas, his weight thrown to the wrong edge of his foot. He flung out an arm to catch himself, breaking posture before the cameras. That single motion, the save, was all it took. The crowd saw it, screens replayed it, and the truth spread seat by seat like a contagion. The man who had declared himself untouchable had just been touched, made mortal in front of thousands. The noise swelled, part cheer, part disbelief, part hunger for what would come next. Seagal reset, jaw tight, breath heavy, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed what words never could. For the first time, he understood Norris wasn't here for spectacle. He was here to teach. And the lesson had only begun. The crowd's energy shifted after that last exchange. Moments earlier, laughter had filled the arena, the kind of mocking noise that feeds bravado. Now it thinned into something heavier, quieter, an anticipation too sharp to disguise. People leaned forward in their seats, their phones lowered. Nobody wanted to miss a detail. Seagal felt it too. His jaw clenched, his smile forced back onto his face as though muscle memory demanded it, but his eyes betrayed something else. He had expected control, spectacle, dominance. Instead, he had found silence. He came forward again, this time without the grandiose arcs of before. There was urgency now, a strain in his body. His hands shot out faster, cutting sharper lines through the air. Each blow was heavier than the last, weight pressed into them like anger compressed into motion. His sweat flung outward under the lights, scattering droplets like glass shards. But every strike met the same fate. Norris moved just enough, half a pivot, a tilt, the ghost of a step. Where Seagal poured energy, Norris offered stillness. Where Seagal strained, Norris breathed. The contrast widened with each second until it became impossible to ignore. A camera cut close to Seagal's face, and the big screen magnified what the arena was already sensing. The arrogance was gone. His eyes darted, searching for an opening, his breath catching between strikes. His lips tightened not in a grin but in frustration. The crowd saw it, and the reaction was a low, rolling rumble, half disbelief, half exhilaration. Norris finally answered, not with a heavy blow but with a simple, economical jab to the chest. It wasn't brutal, it wasn't even loud, but it landed with the authority of precision. Seagal grunted, his posture breaking for an instant. That one sound carried across the microphones, amplified through speakers, and the audience erupted. Seagal pressed harder, desperate to reclaim ground. He swung wild, then tried to muscle Norris backward with his size. His arms wrapped for a clinch, his body leaning to pin. Norris shifted his hips, slipped free, and landed a short strike that snapped Seagal's head back without effort. It wasn't a knockout. It was worse, it was a lesson. The chants began. First scattered, chuck. Chuck. Then swelling until it shook the rafters. Seagal's supporters tried to drown it with noise of their own, but the balance had shifted. The arena no longer laughed at Norris's age, no longer doubted his quiet. They had seen enough to feel the inevitability in the air. Seagal, flushed and panting now, tried to force a smile again. His hair clung to his face, sweat running down his temples in dark streaks. He lunged with another combination, arms crashing like hammers. Norris answered with a sidestep and two sharp counters, one to the body, one grazing the chin. The younger man stumbled. His knees didn't buckle, but the wobble was clear. For the first time, Seagal looked small inside the cage. The bigger body, the younger muscles, the loud bravado, all of it seemed diminished against the calm rhythm of Norris's breathing. Chuck's chest rose and fell with an almost meditative steadiness, his face unreadable, his eyes focused. The arena responded with a sound that was neither cheer nor boo, but something stranger, awe. People were watching ego dissolve in real time. Every missed strike, every ragged breath, every precise counter from Norris chipped away at the myth of untouchability that Seagal had carried to the microphone days earlier. Then came the moment that locked the crowd in silence. Seagal, furious and flailing, tried to drive Norris into the corner, pounding his fists like sledgehammers. Norris stepped sideways, pivoted, and placed a single open palm against Seagal's chest, guiding him past like a child running downhill too fast. Seagal nearly crashed into the cage wall, catching himself just in time. His chest heaved, his arms sagged for a fraction of a second. The camera zoomed in again, sweat dripping, eyes wide, breath labored. Seagal no longer looked like the man who had promised invincibility. He looked like a man trying not to drown. The crowd, sensing the shift, began to roar louder than before, voices colliding into a deafening wave. Some shouted for Norris to finish it, others for Seagal to fight back. But beneath all the noise was a single, shared realization: this wasn't showmanship anymore. This was a real fight. And everyone in that arena knew they were about to witness the moment that would decide it. They circled slower now, the cage heavy with silence, the kind of silence that doesn't mean absence of sound but a density of attention. The crowd's roar had collapsed into a low, buzzing hum, thousands of people breathing at once but unwilling to speak, unwilling to miss the next heartbeat. Seagal wiped his brow with his glove, a gesture meant to look casual but betrayed by the tremor in his chest. He snapped out a jab, then another, punches that looked sharp to the untrained eye but carried hesitation underneath. Norris, by contrast, stood rooted and effortless, his weight drifting from heel to toe like a man simply testing the ground beneath him. The commentators shifted tones. Gone was the carnival excitement, now their voices carried the hush of disbelief. "Listen to this room," one whispered. "Nobody's laughing anymore. They're waiting." Seagal tried to reclaim control the only way he knew, by shouting over doubt. He raised his chin and roared across the cage, his voice tearing through the microphones, "He can't drop me. Not now, not ever." But the echo betrayed him. The words, once weapons, now sounded brittle. Laughter erupted in patches, uneasy, jagged. Others booed. And above it all, a chant rose and hardened: "Chuck. Chuck. Chuck." It wasn't choreographed, it was primal, a rhythm that pulled even strangers together. Norris gave no reply. His silence was the reply. His eyes measured, scanning Seagal's stance, the swell of his ribs, the speed of his recovery. Every breath told a story, and Norris read each chapter. He wasn't looking for a weakness. He was waiting for inevitability. Then Seagal lunged. Not with the lazy bravado of earlier, but with desperation. He hurled himself forward, a heavy straight line meant to end the doubt in one strike. The crowd gasped, half in fear, half in anticipation. For a moment the cage blurred with motion. Norris didn't vanish. He tilted an inch, just enough to steal the line of attack, and in that sliver of borrowed space he returned fire. A short shot, a whisper of movement, fist driven clean into the ribs. The sound of contact wasn't loud, but the effect thundered. Seagal's breath collapsed, his chest shuddered, and a raw grunt escaped before he could choke it down. The arena erupted. Thousands leapt to their feet as one, hands flying upward, phones catching shaky light. Some screamed his name. Others screamed at the shock of what they'd seen. A woman in the second row clasped her hands to her mouth as though witnessing an accident she couldn't stop. Seagal staggered but didn't fall. Pride is stubborn, it dragged him forward even as his lungs pleaded for order. He swung again, wild, heavier, clinging to anger for balance. He tried to clinch, arms wrapping in frustration, seeking to smother his opponent. Norris turned him away with a calm hand, a redirection more elegant than violent, guiding him like water flowing around a stone. And then came the turn. Norris planted his feet, pivoted with precision born from decades of discipline, and let his right hand travel just far enough. It caught Seagal on the cheekbone, sharp and exact. No wind-up, no roar, only correctness. The bigger man's body unraveled, legs folding, balance dissolving. He fell sideways, one glove trapped beneath him, the other reaching upward like a drowning man searching for air. For a single beat, silence. The crowd didn't know if it had permission to scream. Then the wave hit, sound bursting in from every corner, shaking the rafters, rolling over the cage in a storm of disbelief and ecstasy. Commentators shouted, voices cracking. Cameras zoomed tight on Seagal's face, showing eyes wide with shock, mouth open with a question even he couldn't answer. Norris didn't celebrate. He stood still, breathing measured, gaze steady. No raised arms, no smirk, no victory pose. The victory was obvious, it needed no punctuation. The referee hovered, bent low, speaking, testing. Don't move. Seagal ignored him, tried again. He rolled to a knee, gloves sliding once on the sweat-slicked canvas. He caught himself on the second try, chest heaving, sweat streaking down into his eyes. The count began. 1. The word boomed. Cameras panned to the crowd. Half were screaming for it to end, the other half begging him to stand. 2. Seagal steadied one hand, his other glove still trembling. 3. He planted a foot. At 4, his body betrayed him, wobbling, but at 5, he forced himself halfway up. Each number was agony. Each number pulled more sound from the crowd. At 6, he clung to the rope, blinking at the lights above, eyes glassy but alive. At 7, he planted both feet, legs quivering. At 8, he let go of the rope, jaw clenched, chest burning. The arena leaned forward like a single creature, tens of thousands breathing in unison, waiting. Norris didn't move, didn't press. He simply watched. Seagal's lips moved, forming a sentence no microphone caught. Something private. Something desperate. His face pale, his pride bloodied, but he was standing. The referee's hand hovered, ready to decide. The commentators held their tongues. And the crowd, hungry, unsettled, asked the same question in silence. Was this the end, or the beginning of something even more dangerous? The referee's hand floated in the air like a blade waiting to fall, fingers spread, his eyes darting between Seagal's trembling legs and Norris's calm stance. The cage was no longer just a ring, it had turned into a stage where pride and silence battled louder than fists. Seagal stood on willpower alone. His chest heaved as though each breath had to be pulled up from the bottom of a well. Sweat ran into his eyes, blinding him with its sting. Somewhere in the crowd a lone voice tried to cheer, but it cracked mid-shout, swallowed by the 1,000 others who had gone quiet. The man's words had no weight anymore. Norris hadn't moved. He didn't need to. His hands hung at his sides, but his presence filled the space. The crowd noticed it too. They were no longer chanting in rhythm, no longer roaring, they were waiting. The air buzzed with restraint. The referee bent close to Seagal. "Show me," he said, soft but clear enough for the nearest camera to catch. Seagal raised his gloves, heavy as anchors, just enough to satisfy procedure. The count stopped at 9. The fight resumed. A ripple ran through the audience, part relief, part dread. Some fans screamed for more violence, others whispered that enough had already been proven. Neither side mattered. The choice rested on two men. Seagal tried to find himself again. He rolled his shoulders, bounced lightly, forcing his body into a rhythm it no longer trusted. The bounce died quickly. His right shoulder ached, his jaw throbbed where Norris's fist had landed clean. Still, he moved forward, pride first, body second. He jabbed once, twice, more to convince himself than to test Norris. Both punches sliced empty air. Norris tilted slightly, letting the jabs ghost past. His face betrayed nothing. He read Seagal the way a teacher reads a student's half-finished essay, seeing not only what was written, but what was missing. The crowd leaned forward, thousands of necks craning in unison. Every missed strike, every breath between them, tightened the rope of suspense. Then Seagal lunged again, heavier, reckless. He wanted an ending he could control. His glove cut a line through the air, aiming straight for Norris's temple. The move was desperate, and desperation always slows a punch no matter how hard it's thrown. Norris stepped half a pace, shoulders turning just enough, and in that pocket of space he delivered a short, surgical shot to the ribs. The sound carried louder than it should have, a hollow thump followed by Seagal's involuntary grunt, a sound that betrayed pain no bravado could cover. People in the front row actually winced, their bodies reacting as though the blow had landed on them. Seagal staggered, fighting both gravity and humiliation. He swung wide again, tried to clinch, tried to bully the moment back under his control. Norris brushed him aside with quiet precision, redirecting him with the ease of a man moving furniture out of the way. Then came the turn. Norris planted both feet. His right hand traveled in a perfect line, neither fast nor slow, but certain. It landed across Seagal's cheekbone like punctuation at the end of a sentence already written. Seagal's legs betrayed him. His body crumpled sideways, glove caught beneath him, the other groping at the air as though reaching for a truth he could no longer hold. The crowd erupted. For a second the arena felt like it might split open, screams, whistles, cups crashing to the floor, cameras trembling in shaky hands. But under that storm was another sound, a hush of disbelief. People realized they were seeing more than a man knocked down, they were watching pride unravel in real time. Norris didn't celebrate. He didn't lift his fists or roar to the rafters. He simply watched, chest rising steady, as the referee hovered. The big screen caught Seagal's eyes wide with panic, his lips muttering words no microphone could catch. The referee began to count again. 1. The noise quieted. 2. The crowd leaned forward. 3. Seagal planted a glove, trying to rise. At 5 he staggered halfway up, clinging to the rope like a man clutching driftwood. At 7 he stood on shaking legs, chest burning. At 8 he let go of the rope. He was upright, but the truth was clear, he was surviving seconds, not winning them. Norris still hadn't moved. His stillness was louder than any roar. He fainted once, small, and Seagal's entire body flinched. That flinch told the story better than the knockdowns. The champion who once boasted that no man could drop him was already dropped inside. Norris stepped closer. No flourish, no rage, only control. A short dip of weight, a twist of hips, and another body shot, delivered with precision rather than power. It folded Seagal. This time he caught himself halfway, glove pressed to the canvas, but his legs refused to answer. The referee waved it off. The fight was done. Noise filled the arena, a tidal wave of sound breaking against the cage. Some cheered wildly, others shook their heads in disbelief, but all understood they had seen a truth laid bare. Norris didn't raise his arms. He knelt beside Seagal as medics hurried in. For a few seconds the cameras caught him speaking directly into Seagal's ear. The words never reached the broadcast, but his tone was unmistakable, not taunt, not triumph, but something closer to a reminder. Seagal's eyes shifted, anger fading into recognition, then something close to surrender. When Norris finally stood, the referee grabbed his wrist and lifted it halfway, fulfilling the ritual. Norris let it drop. Victory wasn't the point, it never had been. Reporters swarmed him the moment he left the cage. "Is this proof you're tougher?" one shouted. Norris paused, looked toward the crowd where children waved homemade signs. He spoke simply, "It was never about proving who's tougher. It's about respect." The words landed heavier than any punch. Applause swept the arena, not the wild kind that follows a knockout, but a measured, almost reverent ovation. People stood shoulder to shoulder, clapping slowly, like boards nailed together. Seagal sat on a stool, ice pressed to his ribs, silence clinging to him. A microphone was offered. He looked at it, then shook his head. For once, he had nothing to say. And that silence echoed louder than all his boasts. The cameras closed on his face one last time before cutting away. Not to humiliate him, but because the story was complete. Pride had spoken enough. Respect had finished the night. As Norris walked back down the ramp, the cage already dismantling behind him, people lingered in their seats. They didn't want to leave just yet. They whispered to each other, telling versions of what they had seen, each story shaped by the same truth: strength wasn't in fists or words, but in restraint. By the time the arena emptied, 2 narratives had already formed. The short one, clips on television, headlines online, would focus on the punch. The long one, the one the crowd carried home, was about silence, respect, and the moment pride bowed to character. And in the end, that was the lesson the night had written: the strongest man is the one who never needs to prove it.